So again, my name is Cristina Sutter. I'm a sport dietitian. I've been working in sport nutrition for about 20 years. I've worked with swimmers from the beginning and went to World Swim Championships with the Canadian swim team as well, and have worked with everyone from Swim BC to our SFU varsity team to local swim teams. So I'm happy to bring to you some good, sensible sport nutrition advice that'll help you swim faster and grow and be strong and all that kind of good stuff. I do welcome questions. I know I've already got some questions in the queue. Hopefully I answer some of them during the presentation, and I'm going to leave lots of time at the end for those questions as well. So I'm going to screen share now, and hopefully you can all see my screen. Great. So here we go. We're going to talk about fuel to grow, to perform, to swim fast, what balanced eating looks like for an athlete. We're going to look at meal timing, snack timing before and after practices, what that looks like specifically. The key for swimmers being the unique practice style is recovery nutrition and hydration too. And again, lots of time for questions. So first and foremost, food as our fuel. So the food that we eat gives us the gas to go. The main fuel for our muscles, let me see if anyone can guess it here. Does anyone want to guess what the main fuel is that the muscles use when you're swimming? Any takers?
Carbs.
Correct. Thank you, Lee. Yeah, absolutely. Some people guess protein, but you're right. It is carbs for swimming. So that doesn't mean that we need to carb load a huge pasta meal before a swim, though. That's probably going to weigh you down. What's missing in these meals? Can anyone guess here? If you were, and I have to say, I grew up in a swim club.
Protein? No, that's protein. Never mind.
Yeah, Penny, good guess. So I grew up in a swim club, and I have to say that every night me and my siblings would eat that pasta for dinner. And we know a little bit more about sport nutrition, that's maybe not the most balanced meal. What we actually need is protein, and there's something else that's missing on that first pasta dish too. What's the other thing that's missing?
Water.
Water. Guess again, it's green. You want to make sure that you've got vegetables, protein, and carbs at each of your meals. Now, if you were to do this beautiful chicken salad here, you'll probably run out of steam within 20 minutes of your practice. You definitely need the carbs beforehand. But if you only do carbs, then you have no lasting power. The protein is what keeps you going for longer, and the vegetables is what keeps you fast and light. So you need a good balance of all three of those things. And this is sort of what you're looking for at your meals, is a third of your plate or half your plate with vegetables, a third of your plate with carbs, and a third of your plate with protein, and lots of water, of course, too, or milk. Now, when it comes to protein, lots of people are wondering, how much protein do I need? Do I maybe need a protein supplement? What if I'm vegetarian? What if I don't like meat? And the question, or the answer is, you get enough protein if you're getting at least 3 servings of dairy a day and at least 2 servings of meat or beans or tofu or chicken or Greek yogurt every day. So you don't necessarily need large amounts of protein. The portion sizes, as you can see here, are pretty small, but you do need it sort of at every meal. So 1 small portion of a protein-rich food at breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and 1 small portion of dairy at each of those meals, and you will absolutely have all the protein you need. You shouldn't need any protein supplements. So this is what balanced meals looks like. Just one second, excuse me. There. All four of these meals have a nice representation of carbs, vegetables, and proteins, and that's what you're looking for. So I know someone was asking, what's a good meal post-workout? What kind of meal would you have after a really hard swim, a long practice? And any of these would be great because all of them have a third carbs, a third vegetables, and a third protein. And that's exactly what you're looking for. A nice balance there. What you would want to stay away from is anything too high in fat right after practice. Like you wouldn't want to do sort of chicken wings and nachos right after practice. And you probably also wouldn't want to do something that's just too light, like just a salad or waiting too long, for example, as well. And you would probably sort of stay away from, you know, just that plain rice or the plain pasta. You want the balance of all three of those food groups. Now, if I was to pose a question to the group here, which meal post-practice would fuel you best? Or pre-practice? What if you were having this and going for a swim after? Which one would make you swim faster and longer? Take a wild guess.
Number 6.
Yes,
I would guess.
absolutely, great guess. Number 6. And that's because it's got such a good representation of the carbs, vegetables, and lean protein. Now, 2 and 3 are both missing carbs. You wouldn't get any fuel for that. So that would be sort of a very short-lived wimpy swim. And number 1 would weigh you down. Holy smokes. Anyone tried to swim after eating a big, heavy lasagna, you would just be slow and heavy during that swim. So awesome guess. There was another question, and it was, how do we promote healthy eating for our swimmers? How do we role model that? And this addresses that a little bit. So to make a good diet even better, you want to pack your snacks, for swim practice, for school, for work, and on the go. So rather than maybe hitting a fast food or drive-through, and just, or maybe not having a snack and maybe waiting till you get home, it's good to pack those snacks every time you go out. So I don't leave the house without a lunch bag full of snacks. They're in the purse, in the car, in the swim bag. You want to take lots of fruits with you, take some vegetables, a variety of vegetables for snacks as well, include some whole grain carbs, and some protein too at each meal. And that's the best sort of probably most bang for your buck in terms of giving young swimmers good nutrition is packing the food with you and getting a balance from the fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and protein at each of your eating opportunities. There was another question, and that was snacks for practices. And let me just tick these off here. The snacks for practices can be fruits, yogurt, crackers, smoothie, peanut butter toast. You could do a chocolate milk. You could do an overnight oats, banana, a little bit of sushi, energy ball, banana bread, or any combination of those snacks. And all of those snacks would work well for before practice and after practice. What these snacks have in common is that they're mostly carbs, and they're pretty simple. They're not processed. They're not filled with sugar. They're quite nutrient rich. Now, if you have a taller swimmer, maybe a 15-year-old boy or a 14-year-old boy, none of these snacks are going to be enough, and he's going to need probably just an extra sandwich before or after practice. So we tend, because the practices are so long, and some days you're even doing 2 a day at times, you might need 2 lunches, or you might need 2 breakfasts. And so when you pass that age threshold of maybe 10 years old and you get into sort of 11 and up, some of these snacks just won't be enough. And that's when you need sort of a bowl of cereal in the morning before practice and a breakfast wrap after practice. So 2 breakfasts and probably 2 lunches later on too. That wouldn't be uncommon. And so here's some great examples. I know everyone's sort of wanting specific food examples of what would be a good meal or snack to have right before practice. And all of these would work really well. Like probably I would do the oatmeal right before practice or the cereal right before practice. And then the breakfast sandwich right after, or the yogurt parfait right after for the morning ones. And for the afternoon ones, a little pasta salad for right before. Or we could do toast and peanut butter or smoothie. Those work really well too. And a few other examples here. Any questions so far about what we're feeding our kids? So that was the whole section on fueling different types of foods for swim practices. We're going to talk now about when to eat and timing before and after practices. But before we move on to that section, please raise your hand or just ask a question if I have any questions in that area.
We have one in the Q&A asked how many grams of protein in a serving, and so maybe leads to an overall question. You may be covering this about grams of protein and whatnot for the kids.
So generally, I don't think most of us need to be bothered with knowing grams of protein, which is why I sort of answered it in serving sizes. But if you're really wanting to know, a serving of protein, the most protein the body and the muscles can use in a sitting is 30 grams, and that would be roughly in about half of a chicken breast. So it's, like I said, the serving sizes are small, but we just need them really often. So we would want like that half chicken breast portion at each of the meals, or, 1 or 2 eggs sort of thing, or 3/4 of a cup of tofu. Those are the serving sizes for protein that would be adequate.
Mm-hmm. And there was a question about energy drinks, and I'm going
to get to that one. When we talk about hydration, I'm going to get to that one. So let's talk about food timing now. So timing. You want to eat often to get stronger, to fuel your sport. Never train on an empty stomach. I know swimming practices are crazy early, and I know sometimes it's just too early to eat anything, but you gotta eat something before that morning practice, even if it's just like half of a Cliff Bar or a piece of toast or a glass of milk. Like, eat something, and always eat immediately right after every practice. If you have a long drive before you get home, then you want to eat, have something in the car or in your swim bag. And generally throughout the day, you want to make sure that you don't go more than 3 or 4 hours without eating. So if, and I'll break it down a little bit. So if you have a morning practice, say from 6 to 7, then you would have a pre-practice snack around 5:30. You'd have a recovery snack immediately after practice, as soon as you get out of the water. And then you would have breakfast around 8 o'clock. And then you'd roll into morning snack, lunch, afternoon snack, dinner. And if you're hungry at night, don't go to bed hungry, have an evening snack. But, maybe you're going to bed early. You don't necessarily need to have that one. Any questions about this timing? So this is the same timing, and I've just substituted in foods here. So before practice, you could have smoothie or oatmeal or toast or granola bar, maybe a slice of banana bread, whatever you can stomach before practice. And then right after practice, you have a smoothie or a chocolate milk or a bar or some dried mango, anything carby to help you with that recovery. And you have breakfast sort of when you get home or on your way to school, whatever. And then your normal lunch at school and after school snack. I know I've got it really healthy here, veggies and hummus, but it could be any number of things. You could do crackers and cheese with some veggies or fruit, a yogurt parfait, whatever you like, your regular family dinner. And if you wanted a bedtime snack, you could, or you just have a piece of fruit or milk or not at all if you're done after dinner.
I have a question about that slide.
Yeah.
That sounds great. I'd love that. But my kids, I can't get them to eat 90% of that. So is that a strategy or is that a whole other speech topic? Getting kids that are picky or have very particular food tastes that they would like, that I just struggle with that.
That is so picky eaters, yes, that's a whole different topic, and I can dedicate some time to that, time permitting, if other people are interested as well.
Okay.
But we could also tailor it to the foods that your kids do like maybe they would have toast and peanut butter before breakfast, maybe after or before practice, maybe after practice they'd have chocolate milk, and then maybe for 8 a.m. they'd have a breakfast muffin that you sort of made from scratch. And maybe in their lunch, you made them a bagel sandwich with, whatever their preferred fruit is and a yogurt drink. And then for after school, maybe it's like fishy crackers and cheese and some carrot sticks or something.
Right.
And dinner is whatever dinner is. And so we can simplify it or cater it more to their preferences. But there is a whole philosophy on if you have picky eaters, how to help them expand their palate.
That'd be a good topic for me to have.
Yes. I could go on for an hour on that topic alone. But for an evening practice, for example, this would be the timing you'd be looking at where you're actually having 2 lunches on an evening practice. Don't make the mistake of having just, a bunch of crackers after school and then like waiting till dinner till you get some food, because you will be starving in that evening practice, and halfway through, like your kicks are just gonna lose all their power and speed, and your coach will see it too. And the challenge there is, you're hungry for dinner right at the time where you're supposed to be in the water. You don't want to eat dinner right before you go in the water, because then you'll sink and you'll lose speed. You won't have time to digest it. And so you got to think ahead. And so for your after school snack, instead of wasting your time with fishy crackers after school, you have basically a grilled cheese sandwich and a smoothie. Like you have a second lunch at 3 or 4 o'clock. That gives you 2 hours to digest it. You will be going hard and strong in that evening practice. And then you have a light recovery snack and dinner as much as you're hungry for it. And that's how you would train really well for those nighttime practices. So again, just throwing in some foods that you could use during those times. Any questions about this format here? I did throw in a granola bar at 5:30. So if it's a particularly long or hard practice and it is over a meal time and you find you might be kind of tired or hungry towards the end of it, it's really helpful to have a shot of fast carbs right before you get in the water. So like any kind of simple Nature Valley granola bar would do in that case. And just in the half hour before you get in the water, that really works to help your stamina and your speed during that practice. So some questions to reflect on in your diet is, what is your meal timing? When are you having something before practice? When are you having something after practice? Are you eating every 3 to 4 hours? Are you missing some snacks? Are there some blind spots or irregularities in your practices? I would say that if you're having some practices that are really strong and you're feeling fast and strong in, and other practices that you lose steam and your legs turn to noodles, that's not a training issue, it's not a strength issue, and it's not an endurance issue, that is a fueling issue. So we really want to make sure that you're fueling at the right times with the right food to go longer and harder and more consistent through all your practices. And that is a really good segue to recovery nutrition. So for recovery nutrition, we look at that main fuel for the muscles. So your muscles have a gas tank for their fuel stores. These are called the glycogen stores. And the gas tank can only hold enough fuel or carbs to sustain about 40 minutes of moderate intensity swimming. After about 45 minutes of swimming, those glycogen stores or fuel stores are empty. And that's when you feel like your legs just turn to noodles, like they just don't have the speed and strength behind them anymore. When that gas tank is empty after every practice, towards the end of the practices, your muscles actually start to break down for fuel. And if we don't refill it very quickly, it'll be empty going into tomorrow's practice. And when your gas tank is empty going into tomorrow's practice, you can't swim as hard, as fast, or as long. You lose focus and you sort of crash and hit the wall or bonk, so to speak. Now, this is really common when you have back-to-back practices. For example, if you have one evening practice and then a morning practice the next morning, then usually that morning practice stinks if you didn't eat right after that nighttime practice to refill your stores. So that's what recovery nutrition is for. If you eat and drink within the 30 minutes right after each practice, that will refill your muscle fuel stores. You'll build muscle strength and endurance. Your muscles actually get bigger and stronger. It prevents your muscles from breaking down, and it allows you to swim faster and longer at the next practice. Now, in theory, you should be able to have any number of practices all day long, all week long, and have consistent performances if you do this recovery nutrition. Now, the next natural question is, what are we having for recovery? Is it a protein shake? And the answer is no, it's actually mostly carbs. We want to fill up those carb stores, your gas tank. There is a little bit of protein in recovery, of course, but you also want to rehydrate with lots of water at that time too. So great recovery snacks, again, have mostly carbs with a little bit of protein. So that would be like a yogurt parfait. It would be toast and peanut butter, chocolate milk or a smoothie. It would be a sandwich, a bowl of cereal and milk. All of those would work well. Any questions about recovery nutrition or meal timing so far? Okay, so we'll go into hydration. Now, dehydration is typically more of an issue if you have really long practices, if you're not taking a water bottle to school. I know during COVID, everyone's got masks on, and so it makes it a little bit trickier to drink lots of water. But what we know is if we do get dehydrated, could happen more likely in the summer, is it will lower your speed and your strength, your power, your concentration. You might get a headache. You usually would start to sweat less, or your urine would be a little bit darker. A lot of people might not notice these symptoms until you get a muscle cramp. If you're getting regular muscle cramps, that's probably related to dehydration. Now, in terms of how much water you need to drink, most of us need about 500 mils. I would say most youth, say you're about 10 to 14 years old, need about 500 mils or half a liter or 2 cups every hour of exercise. it would be really good practice to take a water bottle with you to practice and have it at poolside, and just when between sets, take a little sip. That would be the ideal. If that's not possible, then you would just want to get really good at drinking lots of water beforehand and lots of water after too. Now, here's the question I think that came up in our Q&A is Gatorade recommended for young swimmers? Generally, I would say not. Gatorade starts to get really helpful for, I would say, ages 17 and up, who are training sort of more than 2 hours a day. But at the younger ages, you can certainly get the fuel you need just from water and food. I would maybe say the only exception I can envision is if you were having outdoor practices. If you have an outdoor swimming pool, you probably dehydrate a little bit faster. You might want an electrolyte drink there. You could choose Gatorade. I do need to say that Gatorade is brutal for teeth. It's very acidic and sugary. And so if you have any history of cavities or, you know, any problems with that, you would probably want to stay away from Gatorade and get your fuel from foods would be preferable. Any questions about the sport drink before I move on to the next one? No? Okay. Chocolate milk versus milk.
I just said we're a quiet group.
Yeah, apparently. Chocolate milk is milk with chocolate in it. Nutritionally, yeah, it has some more sugar. Sometimes after a long, hard practice, you do need that extra carbs, that extra sugar. It's more of, and it is an effective recovery. It's well liked and preferred by most swimmers, and it's easy and convenient. And so I would say, yeah, it works pretty well for recovery after practices. I wouldn't drink it like with your meal all day long in lieu of milk, but it would be a nice post-practice, say in the evening, to tide you over till dinner time recovery. If you prefer to stay away from the sugary products, then you could get the same effect from a glass of milk and a banana after practice. That's essentially what you're getting from the chocolate milk. Is it possible to drink too much water? I would say it's unlikely, and haven't really come across it much in swimmers, so I wouldn't worry too much about drinking too much. And here's a case study. So Alex drinks when she's thirsty during the day, nothing during practice, and a cup of water after practice. What do you think? Do you think she's hydrating well? Do you have any suggestions?
Everybody just unmute yourself and jump in with an answer.
She needs more water.
Yeah, during the practice, I think she should
A lot more water.
take some on.
If you're drinking when you're thirsty, you've gone too long
Yes,
without it.
that's the key is if you wait till you're thirsty, you're already dehydrated. So you need to sort of have water nearby and just be in the habit of drinking it throughout the day and during practice too. You're right. Thank you. And so that's the core of my presentation. I know there's one other question about carb loading, and I sort of addressed it before, but I'll address it more directly now. In the olden days, we used to carb load before swim meets, have big pasta dinners the day before, and that generally sort of made us a little bit heavier and was a little bit of overkill. We don't need to really carb load before a swim meet, but ideally before a swim meet, you are still having that balanced meal that has, you know, a 30-30 split between the carbs, the vegetables, and the proteins. And when you're doing that, that sort of already is enough carbs. You are carb loading, and usually your week is tapered before a swim meet. Your practices are a little bit lighter, so you're not so depleted, and that loads you as well. So you don't specifically need to do anything very different before a swim meet. In fact, a lot of swimmers prefer to kind of swim a little bit light. They don't want to be weighed down. They don't want something in their stomach. So eat light, swim fast, but eat often would be my tips for swim meets. Whenever we get back to those. I'd like to open the floor up to general questions now. And if I don't get any, then I can address the whole eating disorder and picky eating.
There was a question here in the chat that's often people don't have enough time to make food. And what are some of the best fast food choices or food out choices? And which ones do we avoid?
Okay, so if I was gonna do fast food, I would probably do like some egg bites. Tim Hortons has egg white spinach egg bites, those kind of sous vide things, and a bagel. And that would be super healthy. And just the same, if you wanted an orange juice or milk with that, that'd be fine. If I was going to McDonald's, I would probably get like an egg McMuffin, but I would get it with bacon, not with the sausage. The sausage is really too greasy. Or I would get like maybe the pancakes and eggs. I would try and get a protein in there. If your kids don't like the eggs, I would maybe get one of those chicken wraps. They have those kind of chicken salad wraps. And if we're talking about evening practices, I would have no problem with sort of a regular hamburger, I would say, like not one of the double-decker super huge ones, but if you have a kid who's really hungry and you can't get home for dinner and it's going to be burgers tonight, I would be fine with that. But I wouldn't do the pop and the fries probably as a habit. If this is going to be kind of a regular thing that post-practice we're going to get burgers, I would just get the burger, and then when you get home I'd make a smoothie, and then we could have maybe a bowl of fruit for bedtime snack or something, so that it's not so heavy. Remember, we don't want a lot of grease right after practice.
So Cristina, you mentioned during your talk a couple of quick foods that we could get. So things like Cliff Bars, and then something like pita bread and hummus. Are there options like that you can, they're very quick preparation and very portable? So maybe if you could just run over a couple of those. And are there better things like, is a plain granola bar probably not the best as compared to something like a Cliff Bar?
So snacks that you can travel with and take with you. Yes, granola bars, or, maybe a healthier homemade muffin or something like that. As granola bars go, yeah, there's a large variation between them. Probably the cheapest healthy ones would be like the Kashi granola bars. They're kind of made from whole grains, or the Kind granola bars, those kind of ones. The Nature Valley, they're okay, but they don't have much protein. The Cliff Bars are heartier, they're bigger, they're more for teenagers as opposed to young kids. They're about similar to what a sandwich would be. So it would probably be too much for a young kid, because then they won't eat their next meal. But certainly other snacks that I would travel with would be just straight up fruit. Like, I would just grab an apple and a banana and a granola bar and some rice cakes as I'm running out the door to pick them up, and, just say, fill your boots with this stuff and make it work, kind of thing.
Okay, and we had a couple of questions here, one from the chat, one from the Q&A. along sort of similar lines, one of in the Q&A says, is there an easy way to tell what foods have lots of carbs and proteins, etc.? And then somebody was looking for a recipe for a good protein ball. So something, I guess, an all-in-one protein thing that you could grab and take with you.
So the energy balls or protein balls, if you just Google energy ball recipe or protein ball recipe, I think the first two that come up are like Cookie and Kate, and I can't remember one other one, and they have a bunch of 5-star reviews, and you'll get some really good ideas. Generally, the ingredients are dates and oats and peanut butter and some protein powder, maybe a little bit of honey. In terms of how to tell whether a food is mostly carbs and protein, like all your carb foods would be the whole grains, the fruits, yogurt, milk, bread, rice, pasta, wraps, that kind of thing. And we would just want to stay away from foods that are going to be really heavy for right before and after practice. So you would want to stay away from anything really cheesy or really fried, basically.
It's Penny here, and I just, not a question for you, Christina, but for everybody else. I know it's really hard for me when I'm talking to a bunch of black screens. So I'm going to ask if, at least for the Q&A session, if people wouldn't mind sharing their actual pictures, so that it's not, we're not staring at black screens. It's just easier. Thanks, Angel. Thanks, everybody. I don't know about you, but it's easier for me.
This is Nicola. My camera doesn't work, so I apologize.
Okay, I have another one from our Q&A. From a coach's perspective, how do you recommend making sure your swimmers are eating well, or eating good food before and after practice?
That's really falls more in the parent responsibility there. So I suppose the question is, how old is the kid? Because maybe once they're 13 and up, it becomes their responsibility to remember their snacks and stuff. But 13 and down, usually the parents are in charge of that. Sometimes just a gentle reminder to the whole team to, say, remember to have a snack before you swim. I know the practice is early, but try and bring something, or remember to get your recovery afterwards, kind of thing. And then just as a parent, that's where you sort of work with their food preferences and, okay, what's your snack going to be? And you can choose between, a few different things that you like. Sometimes you get bored of a certain thing and you want something different, and that's fine. And sometimes it's up to the kids to ask their parents for what they like. Well, I don't like that cereal, or I don't have time, or I don't want oatmeal in the morning. I really like those particular bars. And so you just got to tell your mom and she'll go out and get them for you. Any other questions?
I have a question, Christina. Oh, there, my camera came on. Perfect. I know you briefly mentioned swim meets, and for the day when we might get back to swim meets, how do we get our kids to think about eating throughout a swim meet? What types of things they could be thinking about for swim meet eating?
So usually we're packing a big lunch bag or cooler or thermos or something with snacks and foods for the whole day. And that's what I would encourage. I wouldn't want you to be buying hot dogs and chips from the kind of candy store at the swim meet. And to space that food out smart so that you're not overfeeding yourself on a swim meet day. Remember I said eat light to swim fast. You don't want to, just because the crispy minis bag is delicious and it's rice cakes doesn't mean you eat the whole thing in the morning, kind of thing, before you've even had lunch. So your events are really short and you don't need a ton of fuel on that day. You mainly need to hydrate and make sure you're eating right before and right after, and your regular sandwich. You're probably eating less on a swim meet day than you are on a school day with a practice.
And we have another from the Q&A. Is there a time for sugary treats? How much junk food is too much?
Well, this is where there was a question about, do we model healthy eating and we don't want to get any like really poor relationship with food. So we try and model healthy eating at the main meals and snacks, and the treats and sweets and desserts and if you want to call it junk, whatever, it'll find its way in, and that's okay, and it's okay to have. And if anyone can have it, it would be swimmers. You guys train longer and harder than everyone else, so it's really not a big deal. What I would stay away from is, calling that food bad, or saying, oh, we shouldn't have it, or it's not healthy. That would be sort of problematic, because it's fine to have. You can get away with it. But you don't want to count on it for your energy to get you through a hard practice. That's going to be a painful experience. You're going to just peter out and not be able to keep up with your potential in the water, basically. So you want the core of the diet to be really strong and organized, and when extra stuff comes in, that's okay. Generally, I would say good habits at home would be to have sort of set organized meal and snack times, and to close the kitchen to snacks outside of that. So we're not, bringing junk food into our bedrooms, or snacking on a bunch of chips right before dinner. Those kind of habits I would probably stay away from.
That's sort of the area that I have challenges with is I can talk until I'm blue in the face, but how to instill that knowledge or that desire to eat healthy on kids that see the convenience food, and if we don't buy it, they just go out and buy it themselves. Convenience food or prepackaged food, or the sugary food.
What age are we talking about here, Penny?
I've got 14-year-old twin boys. Yeah, there's other things, factors in there, but I think it applies. They've been like that probably for 4 years, 5 years. Constant battle.
So generally, I would say, and maybe this is a parenting philosophy, so lots of different perspectives on money and stuff, but I would say kids and money is a responsibility and a privilege that they need to sort of earn and work for. And if they're making choices with their money that aren't consistent with the values that you've expect from them, then I wouldn't sort of give them free access to money that they could just go to the candy store every day after school on the way home. If that behavior was happening, I would say, well, that's not really the choices that we talked about. So we're gonna, save the money for once a week you can go to the candy store, but it's not going to be every day after school.
Yeah, they're earning the money themselves, so we have no control over it.
I think we could probably talk more about that. Like, I think there is. So as a parenting sort of psychologist would say, there's consequences for choices, and to follow through with those consequences, kind of thing.
Yeah, it's just the teaching that I always say you eat better to feel better, and that's the consequence. But yeah.
And so we just have to do it at home too. One of probably the biggest predictor of, kids who eat well are kids who eat dinner at home with a family, sit down with the parents to eat dinner. If we can do that much, then that's like half the battle right there. So maybe you can't control what happens outside the house, but you can control what happens inside the house, and you can control the food that's inside the house and the food that you're sending them with, and so forth. And that's actually, to answer your question about picky eaters, that brings me to the division of responsibility, which is the recommendation for picky eaters, which is dividing the responsibility of feeding to 2 separate tasks. And one is giving, or the parent owning the food choices and the meal timing responsibilities, and the child owning the whether they're going to eat it or not. So you totally control what food you serve and when you serve it, and the kid gets to control whether they're going to eat it and how much. And when you don't try and influence whether they eat your food or not, you just say, you know what, this is what I made, you know, enjoy or don't, whatever, just sit down with me. They tend to adapt and become more flexible, and just eat those family foods, so long as they haven't eaten something else right before the meal. That's why we shut the kitchen down, you know, between meals and snacks.
Yeah, we moved to family style. So we cook the food, it's on the table. We ask that you try everything before you reject it, and eat what you want. But dinner's over when it's over.
Yeah, that's a good approach. Does anyone have any other questions? You can send it through the chat, or you can just speak up.
What's another way to get electrolytes not from Gatorade? Like, what other drinks can we suggest instead of Gatorade?
So electrolytes maybe would be helpful if it was really hot out and you were sweating a lot, or if you drink so much water that you feel like you're just peeing it all out, then you want a little bit more salt. And so I would say most of you don't need electrolytes because you're probably eating enough that you're getting salt from all that food and you wouldn't need it. But if you really wanted some, you could do the Noon tablets or BioSteel electrolyte, and that would give you electrolytes and it wouldn't have sugar in it.
What was the type of tablets? I missed that.
Noon, N-U-U-N.
Okay, so I guess we're at the end of the Q&A. So any final comments, questions from anybody? Seeing none, Cristina, do you have a kind of a wrap up you'd like to do?
Sure. So just to review, main messages is if you plan your meals ahead, they're going to be better. If you take food with you, you'll be more organized and your food will be better. If you try and balance, you know, a little bit of protein foods, a little bit of dairy foods, a little bit of carb foods, and a little bit of fruits and vegetables, you'll get everything that you need. Try and do the timing so that you're having like 2 breakfasts, 2 lunches, if you need to be able to eat before and after each practice. One thing I didn't talk about that I usually like to talk about, and maybe we have time to add that, is sleep hygiene. And because most of you have to wake up so early for swim practices, it's really hard to get enough sleep. And I often find that swimmers who aren't getting enough sleep might be eating differently because you're maybe craving different foods when you're tired. And so to really try and go to bed early at a consistent time each day, even if you only have 2 early practices in the week, is really hard to go to bed early only 2 nights in a row and then not the other days. It's always going to feel like you're doing a time change. So if you're able to really work on getting consistent bedtime and wake time and leaving screens outside of your room so that they're not keeping you up past when you should be falling asleep, I find that that's really helpful for schoolwork, for mental health, for recovery, and even for food choices too.
Awesome. I know we've had debates in our club about sleep, especially with the older swimmers, the sort of the 15 to 18-year-olds who are doing 2 a day, sometimes 3 a day practices, as well as coaching and whatnot. And then just trying to get enough sleep with the early mornings, and you're having a 6 o'clock in the morning practice, and then you're having a practice that goes till 8 o'clock at night. So those are all patterns that I know we've discussed, and I guess that's a topic we could probably get another hour seminar on that. There was a question in our Q&A about getting a copy of the slides, and so just wanted everybody to know that presentations are available for 3 months on the Whova events site. There is a ton of great information that we've seen in the last hour and a bit here. That I know I'm going to have to go back and check in on to get the detail. This has been wonderful. Thank you so much, Cristina, for doing this for us today. We have another session coming up in the main pool. Penny, do you remember what we have next? I think in the main pool we have Megan's virtual aquafit coming up in an hour.
Actually, if you guys, yeah, in an hour that is happening. You can link to it through the agenda page or through, yeah, basically that's how you're going to link to it.
And Francis is doing a strategic planning. Yeah. So strategic planning 101 in the club office at noon as well.
That's right.
Okay. So final roundup. Anything before we log off? Eating is one of my favorite topics in the world, and for me, 11:30 is not too soon for lunch. So
lunch 1 or lunch 2, Carl?
This will be lunch 1. So I've had breakfast and a snack, so we're going into lunch 1 now.
Good. Well done.
All right. Once again, thank you so much, Cristina. This has been amazing. A lot of wonderful common sense stuff and answers to questions that we all have kind of in the back of our minds. So thank you once again for doing this.
Happy to. You're welcome. Take care.
Contact information is on the Whova app under attendees. You can get in touch there. And we'll see you in about an hour.
Yeah.
Not even an hour, 45 minutes, I think. All right. Bye.
Cristina.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Do you recommend any sports gel package or any caffeine tablets for any race before the race?
Sports gel or caffeine tablets?
Yeah.
And how old is your swimmer?
12 to 15.
No, I wouldn't. No, not for that age.
Okay.
If you need a little bit of shot of sugar right before an event, then I would just take dried mango or some raisins or a little granola bar or something. But those sports products are more for maybe the elite level at 17, 18, 19 and up. And they tend to be overused and abused. So I just would stay away from them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
It's a great presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I wonder about that caffeine thing too. My kids both have ADHD. And so there's a lot of parents out there who recommend giving their kids ADHD instead of giving their kids coffee instead of some of the medication. And I'm like, no, don't touch it. No.
That would have the opposite effect, I would think, that is desired. ADHD kid hopped up on caffeine.
Well, yeah, it's a whole other debate, but the philosophy is the stimulant does the job as the medication. It does when I have caffeine, it actually calms me down usually.
Oh.
Another question. So, is Coke is bad for the kids or caffeine is bad for the kids? Coffee or sugar is bad for the kids. I should put it that way, I guess.
So first you asked about Coke.
Coke contains caffeine and sugar, but I think my question will be, sugar is worse or caffeine is worse for the kids about like same like teenager 12 to 15 before the
I'm
race
not
though.
sure if I understand your question. Like, can you tell me the example of what you're concerned about? Like with your 12 to 15-year-old, are you concerned that your 12 to 15-year-old is eating too much sugar? Is that what you think?
Yeah,
So, and are they eating it for like meals, or is it just like snacks or
snacks.
snack? And so they're having like candy for after school snack instead of food. Is that what's happening?
Like maybe one can of Coke.
Every day?
No, just like before the race to boost up their energy, boost up their sugar.
But they haven't had a race in over a year. So when was the last time they had a can of Coke?
No, that was like before the race. That was my question, like when we had a race. When we had a race. So I don't know which one is worse, like caffeine is worse or sugar is worse for them before the race.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So you're saying specifically before you enter into a race,
Yes.
should you be taking sugar or caffeine as a
Yeah.
12 to 15-year-old?
Yeah.
I would never expose a 12 to 15-year-old to caffeine. I just think it's too young, and it can have side effects. They can get anxious and jittery. It can, and it does have an advantage in sport performance, but only in about half of people. And the other half, actually, it can get worse. It can upset your stomach and make you more anxious and that sort of thing. So it just seems really young to put to expose kids to caffeine. But in terms of the sugar, yeah, sugar in the half hour before a race. But I don't know if I would get it necessarily from Coke, just because that rots the teeth.
Okay.
You could get it from a little granola bar, like
Yeah.
a half of a Cliff Bar or something like that, or an energy bite, or even a little bit of dried fruit or sesame snap, or there's lots of fast sugar options that you could have that would work well too.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank
You're
you.
welcome.